Hi there, and welcome back to the FFS podcast. Oh my God, it's been so long. It's been 2 months since we last spoke to each other. It was, obviously, a couple of you have been part of the Euro tournament. Like Dhenuka was part of the Euro watch along, so that was the last time we had her on the podcast. And the other two, it's been little more than before the Champions League as well. But yeah, it's been a really nice long summer break. I was talking to the other guys when I was recording an earlier podcast, and I said for 2 months I kind of just stayed out of football. I obviously saw the news and obviously on the WhatsApp and everything where Messi left and Ronaldo left, but in terms of like, oh, when's the next game, and keeping a list of the schedule, I was just like, no. I was like, let it be, enjoy. And I was obviously busy setting up for season 3, but otherwise it's just like football can happen when it's set up, then I will worry about. So it was a last minute scrap of seeing who's playing whom. Okay, then it now becomes all about schedule. So it was really fun. But anyway, here we are nonetheless. So welcome to the first episode of the FFS series of season 3. And here we are talking about a topic that was actually brought up by one of our previous guests on the podcast, Srivastav. So shout out to Srivastav for bringing up this topic. So during the summer break, he kind of asked me, hey, Pradi, do you think the pandemic has influenced the club's decision to either retain or hire managers who have previous experience or have league experience? So we've kind of got a sort of varied bunch here on the podcast. We've got Lakshay, we've got who supports Arsenal, as you can see, Dhenuka, who supports Real Madrid, as you can see, Ojas, who supports Bayern Munich, as you can't see. And they've got different sides to talk about, and we'll definitely try and get a sort of encompassing view of this. So let's start with introductions, as is the norm, and let's start with Dhenuka. So Dhenuka, welcome to the podcast. This is your first time being on the podcast. You've been part of the watch along, but welcome to the podcast. And why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thanks for having me on the podcast. First of all, I had a blast doing the Euro watch along with Spain.
That was one of the best matches, the Croatia-Spain one.
The Croatia-Spain one, yes. Emotionally for me and match-wise as well for all the fans. I think it was a brilliant match. So thanks for having me on the podcast. A little bit about myself. I'm Dhenuka and I'm President of Women's Affairs at Peña Madridista de Bombay. Also known as Bombay Peña. And I started supporting Real Madrid around 98-2000, so quite early on. And my favorite footballer is Raul, who's no longer playing. But
I'm glad someone did say Ronaldo, the usual Ronaldos and the.
I might just be like one decade too old for that.
You're an honest Real Madrid fan. That shows.
Yeah.
But I started supporting Real Madrid around then, and players have come and gone, but Hala Madrid forever. So I am very excited to be on the podcast, and it's a very cool topic to be discussing. So I love that we have representatives from like different clubs and fans from different clubs. So it'll be nice to get their perspective as well, because mine will obviously be more influenced and more relevant and pertinent to Real Madrid or La Liga, because that's what I follow. So very excited. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, brilliant. Next we move on to Lakshay. Lakshay, welcome back to the podcast. And why didn't you tell us a bit about yourself?
It's been a while. But I'm an Arsenal supporter. Started watching Arsenal around the 05-06 season when they reached the Champions League, and they messed up, obviously, when they reached the Champions League final. But ever since, just been following them, supporting them through bad moments and
through very thick and thin times.
But looking forward for this season, and let's hope things go back on track.
Yeah, definitely. And last, we've got Ojas. Ojas, welcome back to the podcast. And why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Radhi. It's a pleasure being on the podcast. And I'm a Bayern fan. I've been a Bayern fan for about 20 odd years. I also want to thank you, Pradi, for not forcing me to come on the Euro watch along. I think my reasons were very clear.
Yeah.
So, I'm really happy to be back with some optimism. I really didn't want to be a part of the Euros. I think we all knew what Germany was signing up for. So this is great, and I am very excited about the topic. It will be great to gain perspectives from different fans of different leagues, and
I think the funny thing is, when it came to the Euros, the one match that I didn't cover was the Germany victory against Portugal.
Yeah. No, that game was again something that when Jota scored, I was like, okay, here we go. Yeah. I was really hoping somebody would just airlift Joachim Low out of the stadium, and Flick was just sitting in the stands, and I'm like, can we swap coaches at halftime? Can that be possible? Because man, that guy's toxic.
Yeah,
I'm happy for that.
In various more ways than one, right? Like the hands.
Yeah.
I don't know where they've been.
Yeah, I swear. And what all he's done in the last 2 years, man, it's just I'm just glad it's over.
Yeah.
Hey,
awesome.
Ojas, I'm a Real Madrid fan, and did you see who was coaching Spain this time?
But at least you don't have a coach who just drops the best players, and you guys still made it to the semifinals, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
It's pretty come on.
I think despite all odds,
I know. Despite starting Morata in the front line.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the guy has a crush on Morata. I don't know what his obsession with Morata is.
To hear more about that rant, you can watch the podcast.
Yeah, actually, that's a perfect sort of plug-in to. I've just recently put out the entire Euro watch-alongs on the YouTube channel, so you can check out the entire playlist. The Croatia-Spain thing is definitely there, and you can hear more than one person rant on Luis Enriquez on that.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's start talking about this topic. But before we get to talking about the pandemic's influence, I just want to talk about. Obviously, we've got two clubs here whose managers have changed, and one club whose managers remain the same, but to the dismay of certain fans. But we'll come to know whether Lakshay is one of those fans. But Dhenuka, let's start off with you. Real Madrid getting Carlo Ancelotti back. What were your reactions when you heard about that?
To be very honest, I think it was a very good decision by Perez, I think. And honestly, I did not think that Perez would go in that direction at all. And I think he was sort of forced to save face. And because there was nothing much you could do. It was very clear that he tried to convince Zidane to stay on as much as he could. And Zidane's whole decision for leaving was not based on like the last few matches or anything of that sort, or even player signings or anything of that sort, right? It was something that there was like this trigger that happened at a point when last season, Real, Barca, all of them were like close to 10 points behind Atletico at one point. So everyone was getting a lot of flack, which is it's normal. I think that there was like that was a tipping point, I think, for Zidane, because he mentioned it over and over again that, I would like to have had like the club place a little bit more faith in me.
Yeah.
So all said and done, I think this was a very weird sort of departure, and also even the first time was a very weird departure, but I think we've come to expect that with Zizou now. But the whole thing about Zidane leaving and then the reasons, like with the letter coming out, nobody expected such things. And I think Perez had to work within like a day or so, like hours, to be honest. And I bet he did not foresee the whole Zidane open letter coming out. And so to save face, what do you do? No matter what you do, you're going to get flack. Because the last time Zizou left, we had Julen Lopetegui come in. That was a whole drama with the whole Spanish team sacking him and him being like a massive, like it did not work
very,
out.
very upset. I was like, couple of days before the World Cup, and you did that. I was like, no.
Right. And it was clearly that was a completely different thing. I don't know what kind of ego clash was happening there. They didn't have to do that. And anyway, all that aside, there was already the whole matter of Julen Lopetegui not working out. And then we also had Solari trying to come in. So he tried the whole ex-player thing, and so we did try new faces, new coaches, a fresh perspective. Nothing seemed to be working until, like, out of nowhere again we got Zidane back. Nobody saw that coming. and then what do you do after the open letter and the whole ESL debacle that happened last season? And suddenly, like, all fingers are pointing at Perez, and like people are calling for his sacking, and he's under a whole lot of pressure, more than usual. So I think under the circumstances, this was the best thing he could have done. You have Ancelotti, who actually won you a Champions League, the only other manager in recent times to have won you the Champions League before Zidane. So he's a tried and tested manager. It wouldn't have been too difficult to persuade him.
Of course, it's Everton.
Yeah, he was just on a break.
No offense to.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm as much a slander as you want to do on Everton. Please do. As a Liverpool fan, I would welcome it. But
yes.
I mean, talking about that, just a little way, I would have loved to see the faces on Everton fans when they realized that Carlo was leaving, because just a few weeks before that, Carlo came out and said, "Oh, Richarlison will have a 30-goal season the next season under me," and all. And then, like a few minutes later, like, "I'm leaving."
Yeah, I know that. Again, like I said, it was. Had he been at some other club and it was like I don't know, like a Klopp Liverpool situation or something. Not that Klopp would come to Madrid like that, but if it had been something like that, there would still have been some kind of question. So of whether he's going to come here. This didn't take any persuasion on Perez's part, much persuasion. And secondly, he's, I think, the only manager who has worked successfully other than Zidane with some remaining players, like Modric and Kroos and the old guard, basically, Carvajal. And so I think that this was to save face, and he had very less time to work with. And it's going to be very interesting, I think, because his style already in the 4 or 5 games that we've seen this season, we've already seen a very different Madrid side, because we've been so used to Zidane for so long now that it's amazing how it's practically the same side, because, no sign. Oh, we had Kamavinga and we had a couple of signings.
Alaba, yeah.
But practically the same sort of side, but with like a very, very different style of play. So it's going to be very interesting. But yeah, talking about the manager thing, I think this was a necessity more than anything. And I honestly thought it was a great decision on Perez's part, even if he was forced to play that hand. So that's my
Fair enough. Ojas, let's move on to you, because you also had a managerial change. One that was known for a while, though, so no real surprises there. You've got Nagelsmann in, and I just want to know, I don't know if we've had the conversation. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you were part of that, but we've had a conversation before in the previous season. But nonetheless, your reaction to the signing, and also, how's he adapted now to Bayern?
Yeah, so basically, obviously, Hansi Flick leaving was a huge blow. It was something that I and I think a lot of Bayern fans didn't want to accept, because we finally had a coach that players would go to war for. Like, Bayern in that regard is a very tricky dressing room, right? It's not really like high-profile coaches have had a huge problem despite all their credentials. Like a coach like Ancelotti, who's won the Champions League thrice, for the lack of a better word, failed at Bayern. And that is despite him in his 18 months having won the league, having done well, and really being knocked out of the Champions League in an unfortunate fashion. But the thing with Bayern, though, is that you need a coach who's tactically extremely fluid, who's somebody who's going to break the opponent down for you, sit with the player. With that in mind, I think that's the reason why I think Bayern, just a bit of a recap, they failed with Ancelotti and Kovac. Ancelotti is a dressing room favorite, right? He's the kind of guy who's, and especially I think even with the language, I think it wasn't a very smart move on Bayern's part to get a coach who did not speak German fluently. And with Nico, I think he wasn't tactically as sound as a Hansi Flick, who'd been an assistant coach for. And it's been rumored that he was ghost coaching the Germany team also under Joachim Löw, and Joachim Löw was more just the man manager or just the face. And so essentially, and that happens with a lot of clubs, right? That is essentially how clubs would coach in the past. You would have a man manager and you would have the first team coach. So even with the likes of Brian Clough, these things have been around. So so what happened was Hansi Flick leaving was something that it was hard to digest, but it was easy knowing that he was not going to another club and he was going to Germany. And with Nagelsmann, come on, we knew that he was earmarked for the Bayern group. It was a matter of time. At some point, our paths would collide. So my thing with Nagelsmann was that I wasn't very sure or very certain about him joining Bayern. I thought that it was a little early. I do see some Conte-esque traits in him where he does seem to complicate European games. I felt that the Liverpool games could have been better. They could have been more adventurous. I felt the same way about the PSG game the season prior, where I think the team lost tactically before they lost on the field. Having said that, I also feel that like for a club like Bayern, where there are players who've won it before and they have some sort of a tactical side to them with the likes of Muller and the likes of Kimmich. I feel that Bayern is willing to forego European success and is willing to build something long term, because Uli Hoeneß had come out and said that we were prepared to give Flick a 5-year contract, and he essentially just caught us by surprise, like by wanting to leave. So I think with Nagelsmann, I'm not really expecting like European dominance or European resurgence. What I'm expecting is a team for the future that will stay cohesive, and that's what we're seeing also with Kimmich extension and Goretzka extend his contract. So, and also football-wise, I think he's been a little more pragmatic because he realizes that no matter how well he does, 3 bad games and his job is on the line. So I think times are exciting, but I wouldn't get ahead of myself. This is start of the season. Like I call this the honeymoon phase. For me, the season starts in February. So whatever happens between now and then essentially is something that is absolutely not a sign of how things would happen, because there are injuries, there is the winter break. So essentially I'd say that I think we've got the right coach, but knowing like the trigger happy club that I support, I would really hope that we give Nagelsmann the time that he warrants.
Yeah, and speaking of trigger happy, we come to the opposite with Arsenal there, because I mean recently they've been a little more trigger happy, but Lakshay, Arteta, him being at the club, is that a surprise still, or
not at all?
You think he deserves?
For me, at least, not at all. I feel that the club's right to give him some time, because there's a whole new change coming in progress. You see so many players in the past 3 or 4 transfer windows. About 20 players have just left the club because they did not fit the style of Arsenal. They were not Arsenal players. They did not play for the club. They were just but yeah, it was just bound to happen, and we're just waiting for something like this. And a player like him to have a manager like him to have come in and had the balls to actually take out and make so much of change in the last 4 windows is something no one would have ever expected it to happen. You saw Unai Emery being there for 18 months. He did not do anything. He did not let go of players who were not fit to play. He still kept them on. This guy let them go. He was doing, and he's trying to bring in a lot of change, and I think he deserves time for it. And it's not like he has it with the funds that he was given. Obviously, there are two ways a club can go in that. Either you get well experienced players for 50, 70 million for sure, and you go ahead from there. But where's the future in that? And right now he's invested 145 mil on youth, and it's looking fine. Just needs some time. It was a rocky start to the season, but at the same time, like we didn't have players. Players were coming back from injury, and a couple of players have gone out on loan or whatever. Saliba is out on loan. There are a bunch of players who are out on loan. But again, we're looking forward to getting them back and see what Arteta makes out of it.
Okay, so this kind of perfectly transitions into the second sort of segment, and that is the decision to keep Arteta, because obviously performances, whatever said and done, you want to keep a manager for long because you want to develop, you want to build something, you want to make changes. That's all fine. But at the end of the day, football is a results game business, right? So you need to still bring in the W's, enough in order to qualify for the Champions League or even for Europe. You're not even in Europe this year. Oh, no, you're not. No, yeah, you aren't. So I was thinking conference, but that's Spurs. So
bottling that also. We can see
bottling that. Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. Anyway, but so it's all about, you still need to perform and get the results there. Given that, given the pandemic and given how it's been a financial strain on all of our clubs. Yeah, as Liverpool fans, we know the owners haven't spent that much. Bayern anyway tend to don't spend the big bucks, but they have had also financial constraints. The whole league has had financial constraints. Real Madrid, Perez keeps barking about the ESL, needing the ESL to get money, but obviously, as Seferin says, he bids 200 million, he get bucks. I mean, he bids 200 million for Mbappe, but asks for money. But anyway, we've all been sort of financially constrained. So, from Arsenal's point of view, is this keeping Mikel Arteta a way of just making sure that there's some sort of stability? Going out there would be an even bigger gamble for Arsenal, or do you? That's the question. Like for Arsenal, do you think it's a question of keeping Mikel Arteta? The benefit of keeping Mikel Arteta is higher than sacking Mikel Arteta because his performances aren't the greatest, and getting someone in like Unai Emery who may not work out in another 18 months, and again you have to spend another whatever X amount of money, because Unai Emery, I think you had to break his contract, pay him out also, right? So what all of that? So what do you think the reason is?
Like if you've invested about 18 months to 2 years into a young man, a young coach, a young manager, you're bound to give him some time. And obviously he hasn't. If you look at it, he's still going through the transition phase. He's still a young manager. Obviously, he's gotten his experience.
Yeah, but how long does one get to have? Because Arsenal need to be back to, if you want to be considered a big club. I mean, we as Liverpool fans, I know what you guys are facing through. We've had a sustained period of being mid-table, barely making Europa, or just about making Europa, a couple of Champions League here and there. But it's now it becomes even more important because people are spending 100-odd million on one player and all of that. Earlier on, you still had some people, the transfers weren't so ridiculous. So how important is it that, is it important that Arsenal continue with Arteta? And fair enough, like you said, they're building to something. But on the other hand, how long do you give him before they say, listen, we need to start winning and we need to start being competing. We need to start competing with the United cities, because if you let them go and they already bridged. They have a gap. You have a gap between United and you guys. So
the first thing about a team to actually go ahead and compete is to have a strong base. And if you don't have a strong base, you're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And at this point, we do not have a strong base, and that's what Arteta is trying to create. And it's not an overnight thing, and I believe that we need to give him another year or two to actually go ahead and start showing what he's made of, or start showing what he's actually built over the past 3 or 4 seasons. Because the first 2 seasons, it wasn't his team. He was working off of players who were bought in by Emery and players who were bought in by Wenger. But at the same time, he's trying to change everything. He's trying to get in new players, and I believe that 2 years we need to give him about 2 seasons to actually show what he's worth, whether he's worth it or not.
Like I know you have the issue with Kroenke with not supporting you financially, because if you, people often draw comparisons with what Klopp has done at Liverpool. Came in, he didn't have his team for at least a year or two with Brendan Rodgers, but we still got to a final. We still competed. We still got to a top 4. That's the sort of thing that Mikel Arteta probably needs to do. But again, I'm just asking in terms of, given this pandemic, do you think the Arsenal are being influenced because they don't want to risk anything in terms of sacking him and getting someone else?
Even a question. I don't think it was even a question at the time. Like even if pandemic wasn't there, they wouldn't have let go. They wouldn't let go of Arteta. In fact, he would be able to build his team a lot quicker if the pandemic wasn't there and the financial restraints weren't there. I mean, if the club has bought in a young manager and they're trying to do something completely different, all of this would have happened in the previous year, in the previous summer. They, instead of just one party, they would have gone out and signed a couple of other players as well. They would have
I suppose
more players because the other clubs would have had the financial stability to go ahead and buy players. Like right now, if for example, like this transfer window, let's take this transfer window for example. If there was no financial constraint on any other team, I believe Roma would have paid 20 mil instead of bidding for just 15 and letting go of Xhaka. They would have paid the 20 mil and gotten Xhaka. They didn't do that.
And I suppose for a team like Arsenal, like I mentioned, the owners, I remember there was that table that was shared ages ago, but the finances, the breakup of finance, and from owners you got zero. So your main income comes from the gate receipts and all of that. And we played the last year at least behind closed doors, which means you've got no such income coming from that. So I suppose
this was probably the first time the owners actually injected some money into the club.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have had any players.
Yeah. Okay, Dhenuka, move on to you because your situation is slightly different. We spoke about Ancelotti and you mentioned that it was a way of Perez saving face and probably trying to ease the criticism that he got or the finger pointing that he got from the ESL and Zidane stuff and all of that. But also going to Carlo Ancelotti, was that a way of bringing stability to the club? Because we know from financial point of view, Perez has said that they aren't in the best of financial health. You've had this new stadium come now. Obviously, fans are now allowed, which is great, which will increase income. But for Real Madrid, is it about kind of having someone there who knows the club, who's been at the club before, who knows the players, like you said, the old guard at least, who's had that manager? So has the pandemic or has the fact of the fear of gambling or the fear of failure from that gamble sort of led Perez to, maybe Perez would have been a lot more adventurous had the pandemic not been there, or something, may have gone for someone a lot more like a Klopp or someone who's a lot more like, who's got that aura, that sort of fanciness about him or whatever you want to call it. But he's gone for someone like Carlo, who he knows, with Carlo, I'm safe. I know what I'm getting. I know my players know what they're getting. I know at least I will compete for the top, might even get the title, depending on what Atletico do and all that. But at least I'll be above Barcelona, thereabout.
Yeah, I think the pandemic, at least for Real Madrid, it was not I don't think the managerial influence was there directly because of the pandemic. But you never know. It's like a ripple effect, right? The pandemic did have a huge bearing on, for all clubs, it was revenue, right? Like you don't get money from like your season ticket holders and your your regular from the games, and so that was a huge loss. And I remember Perez. So again, my thing is, in a nutshell, for ESL, I thought that the way they announced it and the high-handed way in which they handled it was a complete mess. But the basis of it, if you look at it, it does make sense, because what Seferin says does not make sense now. Because if you look at the way Real Madrid at least have been, we have started an Mbappe fund long back. It's not this season. We've not bought players. Hazard was our biggest buy, I think. After that, we've not bought. And even before that, we had a Bale, we had an Hazard, and that was pretty much it. We've not been, the whole Galacticos thing, not happening with Real Madrid for a very long time now. We started the thing, but it's all the other big money clubs now. But now it's no longer, Real is not the biggest money club anymore.
But instead of buying players at a higher transfer price, you guys are paying them that much in wages. So doesn't that?
We are not. That's the thing, right? So I was coming to that. So if you look at this season, we don't have Ramos anymore. We don't have Varane. Okay, we've offloaded players and we've gotten Alaba instead. We've got Camavinga, who's like, what, 18? 17, 18? Like he's super young. So if you compare and contrast this with Barcelona, the whole reason Barca is in a big mess is because of what you just said. Yeah. Because they don't have wage control. Right?
1 million Messi, 850 at Griezmann.
850 for Griezmann, are you joking?
Yeah,
it was. They luckily loaned him out this time, but they've had to make.
They were forced to, right? Because they got like all
the transfer. It's a permanent transfer, right?
It's a permanent loan. It's a loan with a
obligation,
definite sell. Basically,
so
they have to buy him.
Barca still paying for his wages, like cut of his wages.
Little bit cut price, but whatever. They still
it's a cut price, and there's a clause that he has to play 50%, only 50% of the games he can play for Atletico or something like that. There's some clause like that, which probably is why he was benched. I'm not sure why he was benched, but with Griezmann, and if you look, I've always said this. So last year also, when I was asked to talk about when the pandemic was happening, and in the middle of the pandemic, I was called and asked to talk about this whole, that time the whole Messi Burofax thing had happened, because every time it was, whenever he needed a contract, it was like, main ja raha hu. So this, and every time the board bent over backwards for him. So why would he not do it? I would think he's not running a charity. So like, they're giving me money, I might as well make money. So
I so agree with Dhenuka on this, because this is an inside joke with me and my friends as well. Like, we used to joke that Messi OMTT वगैरह का भी salary लेता है, and they're essentially like, he'll be like, why is he earning? Pay me his salary, and then he like essentially billing the club as Uber rides and all, because what she said is so true, right? Like Real Madrid, one of the things I respect is when they even signed Galacticos, the club's always been bigger than anybody else. And the way Barca's been about the whole Messi thing, I absolutely do not blame Messi for, asking for a contract, because you set the precedent. With Real Madrid, he'd have been out. Like, I'm not a Perez fan, but when you, like, even now, Messi's Barca, I find that statement as a football fan extremely flawed. Right? I do not really agree with that, because you're setting a precedent where you're allowing one person to walk over you. And at one point in time, like a lot of Barca's decline is unfortunately linked with that, man, because a lot of signings, a lot of coaches, they were all made in order to appease the player or in order to suit the player. Now, it's not the player's fault. It's not his brain.
It is. Yeah.
It's not.
But the precedent that you set is so bad, and people will blame Bartomeu, but I'm sorry, this has been happening since Laporta's first term, right? Like, Pep Guardiola left because he was genuinely fatigued by everything. He was practically trying to manage the situation. Then Rossell came in, and that was another fiasco. So what Dhenuka said is so right. Like, you can talk about wages and agent fees, but at the end of the day, a club sets some precedents. And I think even with Real Madrid paying those wages, they know exactly, like, they will. It is a ruthless club. It is like Bayern and Real Madrid, and even Chelsea for that matter. In this regard, are extremely ruthless. If a player is not performing, they're not going to give that player more than an X amount of time, and they are most likely going to be able to recoup the money that they spent on the player. Unlike with Barca, like Ousmane Dembele, how can you even talk about a contract extension for that man? I don't think he's fit to play in the ISL. Let's be honest. He's not. He can't stay fit. Like, that club needs, like, that club like the board needs to go to a business school and run.
Exactly.
And somebody needs to take them through a profit and loss like sheet and be like, buddy, you guys have done like Real Madrid did not even have the Bernabeu last year, and they still are in a much, much better place than Barca. And it's and it's problematic that these guys talk about La Masia, and essentially you've completely destroyed that as well. So I completely agree with what you said.
Ojas, you just said that players don't perform and the club tends to take him out. Like what many of the clubs do is, like, players don't perform. How much time do you think should be given to a player to?
I think it depends on the coach. Laksh. I think it depends if the coach still sees a plan for the player. Like, I think you look at like you look at an example of like an Eden Hazard, right? Like, he's not hit the ground running at Real Madrid. You could say that his tenure has been a disappointment. But if Carlos is fairly certain that I can plan with the player, or like, for example, with Bayern and Leroy Sané, we've had rumors where we a lot of like the board was in two minds about setting a precedent with paying him such a high salary. But if the coach is planning with him, and if you have faith in the coach, where the coach thinks that I can get the best out of him, don't get someone else, maybe he's settled in with the team. I think there's a lot of factors. I think it depends on how well settled a player is. I also, like, for example, just to, like, and this is just my perspective on for example, with say an Arsenal in this regard, a lot of people that I spoke to saw the Ben White transfer as reckless, especially when you had signed William Saliba 2 years ago. But I don't see it that way, because we don't have the perspective that a coach has on the team. Maybe William Saliba, personality-wise, might not become the player that Arteta wants him to be. And my belief with this is that with with personnel changes, I think it's a combination of contract and it's a combination of the coach's plan. So with that in mind, I really feel that it doesn't really matter if it's a season or two. I believe that as a club, for example, and here I completely I take all the criticism with Bayern, because we've made these mistakes with really talented youngsters like Renato Sanchez and Mario Götze, where you could accuse the club of destroying their careers and you'd be right. So I feel that I think the onus lies with the coach and the board to come to a consensus and be honest with the player that, buddy, you're going to be on the bench, and not even in the long term are we planning with you, and your performances have not shown for it. So from that perspective, I was saying that if somebody is not performing, it's the more prudent decision to cut your losses and essentially move on. Something that, to my original point, Barca have absolutely struggled with. When you look at players like Umtiti, Longley, like the list is so long that
the list will go on.
The list is the squad, essentially. The list is the squad. Barring Frankie de Jong.
Let's kind of get back to the topic of managers. So Dhenuka, you talking about how it's a ripple effect, right? So from here, I mean, so like why? Okay, so why do you think the pandemic isn't a sort of direct response? Do you think it's more like the lack of transfers has led to this, and then has led to?
So when I was talking about the ripple effect and not a direct effect, I was talking more about Real, because the way they did their planning was they took the pandemic into account, right? So Perez spoke about how all the players took a wage cut.
Yeah.
And they have not been so even Odegaard took a wage cut, although he barely played. Even he was you're welcome for that, by the way, Arsenal. But seriously, even Odegaard took a pay cut, and so there was this whole situation. And this time around, when with Ramos, it was like, I need an extension, and he had sort of a war of words with Perez over the contract and all of that, like the money and the contract more than anything. Again, it was like, everyone's taken a pay cut. We can't make an exception for you, and this is what we can do because this is how budgeting works. So that's why I was saying for Real, they planned this whole thing. But I do believe the pandemic, of course, has had an impact, because if you look at the stability thing, right, consciously even, you might not want to fire someone at this point because of the whole stability issue. Because here now you need a manager to be more than just a tactical manager. Because, this whole angle of this emotional well-being and physical well-being, all of these things have now come into the picture more so with the pandemic. So, so there was this whole talk, I think, I read somewhere about, how managers will play a more important role now, more than what they did the last time around, because it's a very different game without the fans and because Real Madrid, I think, would have been very happy, to be honest, to be playing in a stadium without fans, because they might not get booed as much. But for like Liverpool or United and all of these other clubs who rely so much on their fans for the the whole motivation factor and to keep going, it's difficult times for the players, even not just physically but also emotionally. And I think if you then make too many changes in with the manager, and you bring in someone who is completely new to the game, I think that emotional well-being aspect also must have featured for some clubs, at least. In Real's case, it came out of nowhere. It was a completely different situation. But I do believe for clubs, they must have thought of this as well, because that's a huge effect of the pandemic, I think.
No, definitely. And I also feel like, obviously, the resignation of Zidane wasn't Perez's decision. I'm pretty sure Perez would have loved to have Zidane continue.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you want to change, like he's mentioned, right? Zidane knows the players in and out. He's got a good relationship with most of them, if not all. And so why would you want to change that? But if you are changing it, why not bring in like a father figure like Carlo, who knows some of the squad, who has a good relationship with some of these members? Otherwise, you bring in someone like a Conte, who's left Inter Milan, and you could really destroy things and change things. He'll stir things up, and I mean, it could be for the good, it could be for the better, maybe defensively, but ultimately maybe, things may not have worked out. But yeah, like you mentioned, there are a lot of these things that could come in play.
And I agree. I think Ancelotti is a safe bet. So I definitely agree there, because there were speculations, right? Every day we were thinking about Zidane has not made a decision. There are three people waiting. They were like, oh, we have Conte, we have Tuchel. Like every random, like no one, coach. I'm like, why? Where are these even coming from? There's no basis for this even, but just because like Zidane said, I might not extend or whatever.
Yeah.
And then so I think if you look at all of those options, even if they were considering them, Carlo was a safe choice. So definitely that must have been playing on his mind. Plus the whole thing, like I said, he wanted to. I think that is the more deciding factor. Personally, I think. But yeah, as a fan, Carlo is a safe choice.
Perfect. Ojas, let's move on to the Bundesliga. Like we mentioned earlier, I mean, the Bundesliga, one of the, I won't say key characteristics, but one thing that you can kind of see is that managers tend to stay within the league, but kind of move around clubs at times. And I just wanted to know, when it comes to the pandemic, how important was it first for Bayern? I know Nagelsmann was anyway destined to be a Bayern manager. He's spoken about it a lot when he was a Leipzig coach, but how important was it that you probably have someone, not only you, but even like a club like Dortmund, they got Marco Rose from Gladbach, right? So how important is it to get managers from within the league or someone who knows the club a lot more, given the financial strain that the Bundesliga had during this pandemic?
So I think in terms of let me just address the financial strain bit first. Bayern paid 25 million for Nagelsmann, which is like I think a world record fee for a coach, which essentially clearly proves that regardless of how trigger happy Bayern is, I think they're trying to mend their ways with Oliver Kahn and Brazo now, running the club. As far as the coaches are concerned, what's interesting is that the top 7 teams that finished in the Bundesliga last year all have a new coach, and most of them have switched clubs. So the Gladbach coach has gone to Dortmund, the Frankfurt coach has gone to Gladbach, the Wolfsburg coach has gone to Frankfurt, and it's been one hell of a merry-go-round. The Bayern coach has gone to Germany, the Leipzig coach has come to Bayern, so it's been like. So the reason I think largely, Pradi, is that the language and the culture. Mm-hmm. I think that plays a huge part in Germany. I think there is with being a coach at a German club, I think there are 2 or 3 aspects that could be a little hard for coaches who don't speak the language or are not well attuned to the culture of German football. One is the fan culture, and I think that's been like something that people have been expecting now this season, especially with the pandemic slowly turning into an endemic and things sort of getting back to normal. But I think more importantly, it's also tactics. If you look at the way Marco Rose sets his team up and the way he plays football, it's very close to how Jurgen Klopp plays football, or like how Nagelsmann sets his team up. It's not very far from how Hansi Flick would play in a 4-2-3-1. So I think it's playing styles, and I think it's also got to do with wanting to retain talent. And I think a lot of these squads are good, where a Marco Rose, before say moving to a bigger club in England, would probably want to follow the same trajectory as a Jurgen Klopp, and a Gladbach would be probably destined to lose him. So I think with coaches in Germany, this has been something that happens a lot, because I also feel that like now finally the Bundesliga clubs are getting better at holding on to their talent before losing them to English teams. Like look at how much a Leipzig and Leverkusen made out of the Werner and Havertz transfers.
Yeah.
Or even 25 million for Thiago, who's turning 30. I think it was a fair deal for all parties involved, but I think Bundesliga clubs are doing better there. And I think that is majorly the reason why a lot of coaches, and I think it all started off with the Hansi Flick leaving thing. I think it set off like a lot of things in motion, like Hansi Flick and Marco Rose. I think these 2 moves set off a lot of things where clubs and actually one thing that people don't really or it doesn't come to light as much about German clubs is a lot of board directors and a lot of upper management switch clubs a lot. So when Freddy Bobic leaves Eintracht Frankfurt, Adi Hutter, who's the coach there, has an incentive to say that, hey, this was the guy I was in for, and now that he's leaving, I want to walk away. So a lot of these clubs have senior key personnel also moving clubs, and that I think plays a big part in in coaches going to other clubs. I think in that regard, German football is very close to what I would consider non-football corporate life, where if you work with someone and a senior or an associate, and they essentially want to say that, hey, life's good here, and we are looking for someone like you. I think essentially it's not very far from that. Like, I couldn't put it in another way, to be honest.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So, friend, I guess we've seen so far that obviously the pandemic has obviously had some sort of influence, but I guess in certain cases decisions were made before that, or they were made. It's part of the plan or this thing, and I guess in certain cases there were other factors which probably played a bigger part. So I just wanted to know whether people considered, because obviously with the pandemic we're talking about huge financial constraints, and there's always that risk or the fear of failing and not being able to, because we're seeing a lot. Obviously we're talking about big clubs here: Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Arsenal, Liverpool. So the risk of going into administration is not the biggest. It's not a huge threat. We almost went into administration 10 years ago, but I guess, if you're talking about the smaller clubs, I suppose for them it's even more pertinent that they ensure some sort of stability, whether it is retaining managers or keeping, or somehow finding someone who's got similar sort of experience. So
I also think Pradi here with big clubs. I also think that with a Carlo Ancelotti or with an Arteta or a Nagelsmann, one common thread I see is that these are not difficult coaches, right? I say this from a board perspective. Like, Hansi Flick had frequent run-ins with the board. Zidane clearly made it a point to know that there were underlying reasons. These are coaches, I think, that would also be okay or would be easy for the board to deal with. Not in a negative light. I genuinely mean that. A Jurgen Klopp, right? Until I think January, when the two centre backs were signed, I don't think he's ever really been vocal about. He's always been. He always said, "I know what I signed up for. I know that there's a way a club operates." So I think these are people who, especially with the pandemic, you need people who are going to at least project a collected, a united image of the club, and I think it's super important.
Yeah, which is why I said, had Real Madrid gone in, or had Arsenal changed Mikel Arteta for someone like Conte. Conte is one who, loves his sort of, it's either his way or the highway. And he loves a running with the ball. That friction is always there. And I feel like if he went to Real Madrid, someone like Perez loves to do what Perez loves to do, right? So it's kind of Perez is my way or the highway, and Conte is also the same, my way. That ego clashing would have been insane, and I feel like.
But Freddy, you know what? To be honest, I don't blame Conte for being that way, because I think at the end of the day, the coach loses a lot more than the club when they get sacked. If Arteta gets sacked today, he would find it very hard to get a job, and he might probably be one of the greatest coaching talents, but he'd be completely be discarded because of his experience. So I get why Conte does it. I get why he left Inter, because the club is clearly in turmoil and it's his rep that will get affected, right?
No, I completely agree. And I
just wanted to point out. So another thing is, this is a club that has also had Mourinho as a manager. So, so it's not like we've only had the Solaris and the Lopetegis of the world managing us, right? Or Capello. And I think that Madrid, in fact, has changed, and Zidane got away with a lot of stuff, and probably because of the kind of status he enjoys because of who he is and his history with the club and the status he enjoys at the club and the relationship with Perez, right? So I think he got away with a lot of things. This is a club that has actually sacked managers despite winning La Liga. The Capello won La Liga for us.
Didn't Carlo also do that? Carlo
Schuster did. Carlo. So this Carlo is a club that exactly, right? So and okay, so at that point it was more of like Zidane was sort of his understudy, and when Zidane wanted to take over and whatever, the club was. But with Capello, there was nothing. We got Bernd Schuster randomly. We got someone from Germany. There was no. Everybody's like, wait, what? And it was out of nowhere. And then Schuster won us the league, and then he was sacked anyway. So I think that from there, Madrid has actually changed a lot. Perez in his second term has changed a whole lot, I feel. And even with Mourinho, right? He was also given a whole lot of freedom, I would think, because he was allowed to buy the players he wanted. So he got, no matter what my opinion about him and my fervent wish that he does not ever come back.
Perez would take Mourinho back, I think.
I hope
players wouldn't want to play for him. The players wouldn't want to play for him.
No. That being said, that's different. But I'm saying his relationship, I think Mourinho would, if they were to.
And that's the other thing, right? Like, he's not burned bridges somehow with all these people. Like, with all the drama that happens when people leave.
Yeah.
He's not burned bridges, because at the end of the day, it's business. For him, it's business. It's not personal, like he says, right? And I think they know that about Perez. So it's the same with the whole Casillas saga that happened. And now Casillas is back. Everyone is back.
We've heard the recordings. We've heard the recordings, and they still continue to work. Like Rahul and all continue to work despite the recordings being leaked of whatever he.
Look, I think those recordings are basically like you moaning about your boss.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Or your boss moaning about you.
And weren't they like a really long time ago?
I really
they were. I think that, like anybody.
Galactico style.
I think when Rahul and all was still playing at that point. So
yeah, I think it's a smear campaign. It's just a smear campaign to sort of extract something out of it.
But again, more than everything, I believe that the media plays a huge role in all of this. Even if things are going perfectly in the club, the media would want to put in something, and that is one reason why I do not like the media at all.
And Lakshay, you guys have Piers Morgan.
There you go. He's a brand ambassador for AFTV.
Yikes.
But again, like all of these things are very toxic to any club whatsoever. You take us for example. Look at how much toxicity is boiling all around. It is not healthy for the club. And believe it or not, if there was a better environment for Arteta to work in, maybe things would have been a whole lot better right now. A whole lot better.
This also brings an interesting point. Do you guys think that because there were no fans in the stadium last time around, and the experience might have been a little different of the way the way the league was played out, that there was less pressure on the managers and the players? And so
one thing I can say for sure, Liverpool didn't enjoy the time.
No, for sure not.
We definitely
get the energy from the corps.
No, we actually had. We didn't start. We started off okay. We had at one point where actually us and Everton and a couple of other clubs were the only clubs in England who were allowed a certain amount of fans. And our performances were so good during that period. And then they shut it down. And obviously injuries also played a part. But was it less pressure? I mean, I guess slightly maybe, but
on the managerial front, I mean, like
at the same
calling
time,
for the head of the manager, basically, which happens after every season,
matter of
right?
4 months. I feel for the top clubs, it was just a matter of 4 to 5 months that they were playing without fans, because after the whole European League happened, everyone was out outside the stadiums and everything, and the pressure was back on to each and every club, especially during the closing stages of the season, which are probably the most important ones, like Ojas said.
No, but
I think Lakshay, though, I think sorry, Paddy. I think on the contrary, I think the pressure was higher. And I feel that way, Dhenuka, because nobody could, a lot of clubs had to make Europe. I think they had to make European football, and I think since gate money wasn't guaranteed, you were guaranteed a certain income, and I think that's why I think a Klopp, a Tuchel, maybe not Brendan Rodgers so much, but I think even in Germany with Dortmund going until the last day, and even the Spanish top four being, again, even if the Champions League spots were decided, I think a few of those clubs in the Europa, I think the pressure might have been higher because there's just so much uncertainty about revenue streams which were stable until I think just 12 months ago. I think the pressure was more because I also feel, this might be completely wrong, but I think the narrative that is pushed with fan pressure is a lot less from fans in the stadium and is a lot more on social media and a lot more in the media in general. So I do feel that, like, when Kovac was sacked by Bayern, like the Sudkova local fans were against that because he was a former player. But the media narrative and the larger narrative was like he was bad for the club because of XYZ reasons, right? So I feel that it was more like, on the contrary, a lot more pressure. Say, for example, had Tuchel finished outside of Europe and not won the final, would he still be at the club?
That's what I was going to say. I was like, that was very, very vital. But also, like you mentioned, Dhenuka, there's a change in the pressure. So fair enough that Ojas mentioned, you do need to, because revenue is low, you do need to win a lot more to get to higher positions. That's fair. But also, like you mentioned, the mental side of things, that is added pressure because a manager now has to deal with things that he earlier never had to deal with. The players being in lockdown and all of that. So you need to become more of like that father figure or someone who takes care of a person's mental health and all of that, rather than he doesn't necessarily have to be personally involved in the mental being of them, but just be around and ask them, and that's where man management comes into huge play, right? Someone like Pep Guardiola kind of at some point is like that. You have Hansi Flick, who is a huge man manager. Klopp, who you may have made fun of his hugging and all of that, but that means a lot for a player nowadays. Earlier our players would have just been hugged and like, we don't care. It would have been a Jose Mourinho type player. We just on the field to perform, come out. But now it's more, it has to be that family build. Like Mikel would have learned from Pep. Carlo is also, a father figure. At least he may not show the hugs and all, but he does take into interest a lot of these players.
Yeah. And I think Zidane was a huge influence there because again, because of who Zidane is, and also the number of times the players have gone on record and said that, Zidane showed confidence in me. He pulled me aside and he said so and so. So more than anything, he was an excellent man manager, I think. And I do understand, because there were people who were asking for Zidane's sacking. I know of Madridistas who were asking for that. So,
for Zidane, I feel like the fact that who Zidane is, the fact that he's been a role model for so many players, and I'm sure all of the midfielders especially have looked up to him at some point of time. So, that sort of reverence that you get from being, and I'm guessing that will be the same. Like you see Steven Gerrard at Rangers, the player that he was, and the club that's rising up. You see a lot of these players look up to people like that, and that also plays a huge difference. But
that doesn't always work, right? So it doesn't work always with Lampard and Chelsea.
No. So Lampard worked when they had the transfer ban and he was forced to play youngsters. But again, it depends on. So Zidane is good because he's got the ego to match other people's ego. So in the sense that he could take care of the likes of Ronaldo and Bale and everyone because he knew what it was to be that kind of a player. In the sense that
he was an assistant for Carlo after all, and
that also helped.
He had experience with players of that stature. I believe Frank Lampard was just put into that Chelsea spot way too soon.
Agreed.
Way too soon, because of course he had that experience of one good season in the championship, but that surely isn't a ticket to the top.
Yeah, I think Lakshay there. I think Lampard was poorly advised. I think Chelsea, it was in my opinion, it was a great PR campaign to sort of get Chelsea out of the mess they were in. And I think Lampard suffered because honestly, I don't think Lampard's a bad coach. I just think that
he isn't.
Honestly, to be fair, I mean, Sarri could have actually continued. He was getting the results. His performance.
I think Sarri really wanted to leave. Like Sarri was desperate to just get out of Chelsea.
Yeah, because
it's a toxic. Again, for the lack of a better word, it's a toxic club if you don't speak the language and this constant pressure and your style is not.
It's not even about the language or anything. Again, the media comes in the way.
Media comes massively
in the way every single time.
And Lakshay, you make an interesting point because the media creates heroes and like scapegoats out of this. Like I remember a season ago or a couple seasons ago, City had a really bad start in the league. But the sort of pressure that Arsenal's in, and they've already got but last year was the year before was really, really bad. And I didn't see that sort of coverage for Manchester City that I see for Arsenal. If you look at the fixtures that Arsenal's had in the starting games, you would not bet on winning, on Arsenal winning those games. And that's not because of the club, but because it's a team in transition. So
again, it's like okay, fine, we're talking about football right now, but there are so many other things also that the media is supposed to cover. And you're talking about performances and everything which are bad, horrible. Okay, fine. Tell me one thing. How many times have Gylfi Sigurdsson or Benjamin Mendy been mentioned in the media?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever has happened. Not even.
Yeah, I mean, Benjamin Mendy especially, like you'll hear the updates, but apart from that, it's like no questions in the press, not many, nothing.
Why?
Like what?
But we're just keeping aside.
These are the things that the managers are supposed to be questioned about, because these are not some small things at the end of the day. These are some things that need to be put light on. Like you guys are running campaigns about Black Lives Matter and everything. Obviously, something like this happening is at the very same level.
But Lakshay, can you blame the manager for Mendy when he's barely at the club? Like he's injured half the time.
I won't blame
him. I mean, like seriously, like that guy should have been let go regardless of what. I have no idea.
I in the first place and buy him.
I won't blame. No, Pep doesn't get any blame whatsoever. But
no, I didn't say that way. I am saying it from a performance and from a just availability perspective.
Yeah.
He's just not like, I have no idea what a player like him does in Man City.
Exactly. But I feel like, I agree that the questions do need to be asked. But
absolutely.
All right. Okay. Let's call it a day, because others, we've kind of switched a lot of topics within this, but it's fine. I mean, it's great. We've filled in the 1 hour quota. That's just awesome. But I mean, apart from that, it was a nice topic. I mean, obviously this was quite a natural transition anyway from topics, which is awesome. So thanks. I mean, I guess that's about it. So first of all, I want to thank Srivastava for this topic. I know we've kind of deviated quite a bit from the topic that you wanted, but we did have answers for what you wanted. And obviously, apart from that, it's moved on to other, related topics, which is great. But apart from that, thank you, Ojas, Lakshay, and Dhenuka for being a part of this podcast. It was a pleasure having you on here, and I can't wait to host you in the near future. Hopefully, for more such podcasts, or we do our other series, the newer series, the watch-alongs. There's so much more that we're doing now. So, yeah, can't wait to host you on those as well.
Thank you.
Great, Freddy. Thanks. Thank you, guys. This was great. I'll look forward to following you guys on social. Yeah, same here. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. And I just also want to say thank you for listening to this. If you're listening to this on the audio podcast, then you can go check it out. And if you're listening to this on the video podcast, then thank you for being a member of the FFS podcast. Thank you for showing your support. And to those of you listening on the audio podcast, I do have to mention that you can watch this. You can watch the video version of this episode if you become a patron of the podcast. The link is in the description. And so Patreon is basically like this membership program where you can subscribe to our channel and show us some financial support. It helps sustain the channel for longer. And I guess apart from that, you can also check out our YouTube channel. Again, the link is all down in the description. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please do comment, like, and share. And subscribe as well to the channel. We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on the same thing. And let us know what you want to hear from us as well, what topics you want to listen to. We'd love to cover that as well. So I guess that's about it for episode number 1 of the FFS series. I'll catch you all on episode 2, which is coming up next week. So that's it from me. I'm your host, Praddy, once again. You stay safe and see you.